Elias and Dane. Currently missing Kimberly Hunter. She may appear. Everyone else is present. So we have one thing on the agenda today, and one thing only, and the goal is to be done by 4 o'clock. So this is the process for today. We're going to begin the meeting with a presentation from Chris Corral, who works for the city of Asheville. And then the commission will ask questions, get some information from Chris again, have a little light discussion. Then we'll move to public comment. So if you're in the public comment area today, you will have a chance to speak. Again, you won't have a microphone. Those general rules are that you'll be able to stand up. You'll have 3 minutes. You'll have to introduce yourself. Use that 3 minutes to express your concerns. If you ask questions, the commission may hold off on answering those questions until everyone has spoken from the public and then answer them all at once. We do welcome you to have public comment. We're thankful to see you here today. Thanks for coming to our special location. And with that, I think we will get started. So we have Chris Corral. Come on up.
Well, hey everyone, I'm Chris Corral, General Manager at the US Cellular Center. Thanks for helping my ego, calling a special meeting just to talk to me. So we're here to talk about naming rights for the Civic Center, currently known as the US Cellular Center. I'm going to give you a little bit of history and try to go full scale through this. And just so you know, the staff report that you have there is the same staff report that's going to council on Tuesday. I just felt like it was easier to give you everything that's coming. The only thing that will change is if you guys do make a recommendation one way or another, there's a TBD mark on that staff report that would get filled in. Same with the presentation here. So the history of the naming rights, back in 2011, council approved naming rights for this venue, which was the first time that the city had ever named a public venue with an advertising partner. It was a $150,000 a year deal, essentially, with a $1.35 million total term over that 9 years. It did have an extension in it, which we moved with the US Cellular, so we're past the point where any extensions can be executed. So there's no opportunity for a 1 year, 2 year, anything like that. This is all new contracts that we're talking about at this point. The current agreement, it expires December 31 of this year. So the process and timeline that we've been working off of, this started back in July of 2018, so we're almost a full year into this. We went to the Finance and HR Committee, presented our planned process, what we felt like our value could be at that time. They gave us approval to move forward. It took about a month to get everything together, including creating our subcommittee on the Civic Center Commission for naming rights. And we sent out a press release right after Labor Day, I think it was Tuesday after Labor Day, announcing the intention for the public meeting and our intention for seeking naming rights partners. So in September 2018, we had a lot of different media outlets report, 4 highlighted there, but I think there were about 10 or 11 media outlets that reported that we were seeking naming rights, that there was going to be a public meeting. Then later that month, we held a public meeting to seek input from the public, and at that point, we started moving. We went and started reaching out to companies, started the negotiation process, at which point we got to April 2nd, which is when we presented to the Asheville Civic Center Commission our 2 offers that we were able to receive in writing. We came and spoke to you guys on April 10th just as an informal presentation. We were really there to talk about the Thomas Wolfe and talk to naming rights a little bit too. And obviously we're here today. So the mission and goals. So this is mission and goals from the Naming Rights Subcommittee of the Civic Center Commission, not council mission and goals. So our mission was to contract a licensing agreement with a notable company or individual that's culturally and socially compatible with the local community. So some of the parameters, goals, were a company or an individual that we felt would not micromanage the naming rights relationship, that was willing to agree to a licensing agreement of up to 10 years, including any mutually agreeable extensions, that could assist in enhancing the customer or artist experience at the Civic Center via assets that would be determined based on the company. A company that could help leverage marketing and advertising relationships to help better extend our reach to the public, ticket holders, and especially in destination markets to really help us drive business into town. And a company that's fiscally sound, and bonus, the ability to provide $500,000 per year for a licensing agreement with either cash or cash and trade. So those were our target parameters that we went out looking for whenever we were talking to companies. So where will we see the name? That's a big question. So essentially everywhere that you see the US Cellular name now, which is exterior signage or big monument sign on the side of the building, Pole banners, whenever special events like the Big Crafty, for example, puts up pole banners, or the SoCon. Street and wayfinding signage that you see around town. Receipts, ticket stock, our staff uniforms, credits and mentions on broadcasts, whether it be locals, web stream, regional, or national, or in the last 2 years, international broadcasts. All of our event advertising, as you know, when the event's advertised, it's at the U.S. Cellular Center. And then our venue website, a small little bit on the City of Asheville website, which is essentially a landing page that bumps them to our website. And then the Asheville app, just in the parking portion of that. And new this time around, when we went to the Finance Committee back in July, we asked if we could use the Civic Center parking garage as leverage to help up the naming rights fee. Mainly because for our guests, it's kind of confusing to have the Civic Center parking garage at the U.S. Cellular Center. It hurts our U.S. Cellular brand because it's encouraging people to keep using the name Civic Center instead of going with the brand of U.S. Cellular. We got approval for that, and so we lumped that in with our naming rights conversations with the different companies. So a lot of people have asked me, where'd you come up with the number? So we used 2 different methods. One, we worked with Western Carolina business students. It was a 400 level senior student semester-long study. They did this massive booklet, like 150 pages of content about the music industry as a whole, venue industry, other facilities. They compared, it was 99 plus us venues that they put together, compared DMA, specific market, a total population in a market, total value of their naming rights deal to come up with what that value should be for the Cellular Center. They came up with $300,000 to $315,000 annually, and they put an asterisk that it was only if there was significant localized corporate institutions. And because what you'll see if you start looking around the country, most venues are named for their biggest corporation in that town or in a really close region. So it's, if you go eastern, like to the middle part of the state, there's BB&T things everywhere, for example. And then additionally, we as city staff here at the Cell Center, we went through and we did a pretty thorough collection of our brand impressions, which was everything I mentioned earlier. But if you think about our name and you buy a ticket and you come to a show at our place, you first see the advertisement, then you see it again when you see the advertisement a second time, then you see it when you buy a ticket, then you see it whenever you print your ticket out. When you come here, you pass 2 signs, then you walk in the front door, then you see it while you're here, then you see it when you leave, and then you get a post-event survey. So you see it 8 times. It's a lot of impressions to get that brand name out there. We took that total number, used an impression value estimator that I got from the Cornell School of Hospitality Management, used our 180 million annual impressions of the brand, took what that number came to, divided it by 2, and got to 732,000 for our value. So then we kind of took that average around $500,000 a year to come up with a realistic number to start asking companies for. Does that make sense? I know that was a lot and a little right there. So who did we talk to? We reached out and touched 14 different companies, had at least 1 follow-up with 5 different companies, had numerous negotiation meetings with 3, and received 2 basic in-writing proposals from companies, obviously Harrah's and U.S. Cellular. So these are the 2 offers we have, Harrah's and U.S. Cellular, that we're working from right now. Continuation with U.S. Cellular, which is a 3-year agreement with a 2-year mutually agreeable extension. And how the deal points work, it's a 2% annual escalator. So years 1 through 3, our total earnings would be about $516,000. Years 4 and 5 would be $361,000. After annual attendance bonuses that are equal to 5% of the annual naming fee, total 5-year term potential is $922,000. And that's a continuation, essentially. So how U.S. Cellular meets the goals. So there's a lot of pros and cons with both offers. A big pro for me with U.S. Cellular is it's continuing a brand that we're 9 years in the making. So we're almost a decade into building a brand that's a generally widely accepted name. We've actually finally got to the point that people are giving it a nickname instead of it just being the U.S. Cellular Center or the Civic Center. People are calling it the Cell Center. Like it's getting that separate brand, which is key to continuing a long-term brand. Really, there's low amounts of dedicated staff time to work with U.S. Cellular. I don't talk to them very often. When I do, it's really quick. We figure out what we're doing and we move on. And it does not require renaming the Civic Center garage. So it's essentially keeps everything as is far as the branding outside of the venue. And they do have a really strong marketing assistance regionally. They've got some text marketing plans. They've got significant reach, and they have buying power that we can tap into if we need to. Cons, comparably, there's no new revenue. It's really minimal compared to the current deal. It doesn't meet the target of our $500,000 annual naming fee, and a match for a video display board. That infrastructure is not there with the U.S. Cellular deal. And frankly, if we accept the U.S. Cellular deal, we're going to need City Council to be really supportive of us aggressively pursuing other sources of funding towards the Thomas Wolfe renovation project, because we need a lot of money for that, and it's going to be really challenging to raise that money. And having seed money to start is the best way to really fundraise, because people will match money all day long. No one wants to be that first dollar in. So the fiscal impact of the U.S. Cellular agreement over 5 years, and it's an additional $128,000. And it does hit 3 council goals that are applicable: a thriving local economy, a connected and engaged community, and a smart city. So the offer from Harris Cherokee, it's a 5-year agreement with a 5-year mutually agreeable extension. Includes $500,000 in year 1 to purchase and install a video board. We, the city, would have to essentially match that with $550,000 of additional money. The U.S. Cellular Center already has that in funds that we've earned from a signing bonus at Ticketmaster. And then it also includes an additional $250,000 in year 1 for mutually agreeable fan improvements. Right now the target for that is finding a way to have free public Wi-Fi in the venue, but their team wants to walk through if and when this gets approved to really kind of see what they can do in the venue. They cater to high-end clients, they do VIP things. There's a really good value there for them to come in and help us enhance our VIP upsells. So over the first 5 years of the term, we would earn $2.5 million for the naming license fee. Years 6 through 10 would be another $2.5 million. Again, with that $750,000 that's in there, the total 10-year potential is $5.75 million. The total 5-year potential for apples to apples is $3.25 million. Additionally, and you'll see it's at the bottom here because I don't want it to be confused, it's not inside this 5.75 number. They'll also provide us with $250,000 worth of reimbursables to change out the big signs, to change out the uniforms, the ticket stock, all of those things, which is 100% their cost, and we're not using that in the comparables to U.S. Cellular because that's not fair to U.S. Cellular. They don't have to have that cost. And that's a capped number. We've estimated all of those things. It comes in around $200,000, but that gives us a little bit of leeway if we need to. So how Harris Cherokee meets the goals: a significant influx of new funding. Year 1, $750,000 towards fan-friendly improvements and video board. Video board is really important to keeping the SoCon long-term. Really important for that. It greatly increases our total intellectual property value of the venue. So if you think about this in 5 or 10 years, if we're going back out again, we've now had a history of 5 or 10 years of earning $500,000 a year. It makes it a lot easier to try to sell $1 million a year. So looking long-term, it builds that brand to help us really grow. The enterprise has a significant impact to WNC. There's a really big economic impact that comes from this enterprise. And like I mentioned earlier, they've got a really good support in their ability to help with staff training on our side. If anybody's ever been there for an event, they've got a really good customer service realm. You walk through that door, you've got 4 or 5 different staff members that say hi to you before you hit your seat for a concert. Right now, I feel like we do a good job. Our reviews are strong, but there's a lot of places that we could improve, and they can really help us with that. And just like U.S. Cellular, they've got a strong marketing assistance regionally they can give us. Their buying power is huge. Their Facebook, their free advertising that they can bring to the table is literally 7 times greater than ours right now. They have a lot of reach. Cons, it requires a re-education of the community. So anybody that was here 9 years ago, they know what it was like in the community whenever we went from Civic Center to U.S. Cellular. We still fight that fight sometimes of making sure people understand that no, we're not the Civic Center anymore, we're the U.S. Cellular Center. No, we didn't sell to U.S. Cellular, we're still City of Asheville owned and operated, it's just the naming rights. So we'll have to go through that process again. It requires a lot of staff time for us to manage the signage change out, uniforms, and a big one is the unknown about our dedicated staff time to actually manage the relationship with Harrah's. I can only imagine, since we're talking 5-6 times greater value, there's probably 4 or 5 times more staff time needed to help manage that sponsor relationship. I didn't mention, I'm gonna go back here, just to be really clear, we're using Harrah's Cherokee as the brand because that's the brand that's going to be named. But you'll see the 4th point down, the actual contract is with Tribal Casino Gaming Enterprise, a wholly owned instrumentality of the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians. So similarly, our U.S. Cellular contracts with U.S. Cellular Incorporated. So, but we're using Harrah's Cherokee as the brand because that is the brand that will be tied to the venue. These are the same 3 applicable council goals. The fiscal impact of this one is a little bit greater. Over the first 5 years, it's an additional $3 million of revenue to the Civic Center Enterprise Fund. And over 10 years, it would be $4.75 million of additional revenue to the Civic Center Enterprise Fund. So your apples to apples comparisons here on a 5-year term with Harrah's versus a total 5-year term with U.S. Cellular, $922,000 with U.S. Cellular versus $3.25 million from Harrah's Cherokee. So where will the money go? I know this board has a lot of interest in public transit and other things. A lot of people have asked me these questions. The money stays here. It stays within the Civic Center Enterprise. The current naming license fee goes towards our debt service from the renovations that were completed 2011 to 2014. And that debt service is paid off in 2032. So any new revenues that come from this, that roughly $128,000 I mentioned with U.S. Cellular, or the $4.75 million that is additional with Harrah's, over and above the current amount, stays in our capital improvement fund. We're planning to dedicate that towards Thomas Wolfe. All the funds that are equal to our current amount that we're earning continues to pay off that debt service from the renovations that we held in 2011 to 2014. Does that make sense?
I got a little lost on the numbers there because, so how much is it that we're paying the debt service? How much of the new money is actually new money for Thomas Wolfe?
Out of U.S. Cellular, over the 5 years, there's $128,000 that could go towards Thomas Wolfe. With Harrah's, there would be $3 million over 5 years and $4.75 million over 10 years.
Some of which though has to go to the debt service?
No, that's all new money.
Okay, maybe I just, okay.
Alright, so boards and commissions, I mentioned this earlier in the timeline. We took this to the Civic Center Commission on April 2nd. There was a vote 3-2 in favor of continuation with U.S. Cellular. We had 3 members absent for the vote and 1 recusal, as one of our members has the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians as a client of his business, so he recused himself. We came to you guys on April 12th. There was just an informal presentation, no action taken, and then obviously we're here today. Questions?
You're not required to have a majority for a vote?
We did have a majority. 5 is a majority for us. We have
You
9
had
total.
1 recuse and 3
Yeah, we
members.
have 9 total members. So 5 is our minimum quorum. We had 7 people at the meeting, 1 person recused, 1 person left early, 2
Just-
people were here to attend. So yeah.
Was there a second Civic Center Commission meeting you voted to? Did I hear that?
We did go back in May just to give them an update on where we were, but there was no formal vote or anything, because really it's just an update that we're taking all the information to City Council,
Okay.
which was the same from the beginning. Similar to this board, our board's an advisory board, so any recommendation, it's just a recommendation. All options still go to council, and then the recommendation is presented to council, so they're aware of the board convention.
Is that all you were, so can we ask questions? Okay.
Shoot.
Now it's time for questions, y'all. I'm curious, so, our process, let me summarize our process as a downtown commission. So as you saw, we heard a presentation in April, and our commission was unable to come to a solution or a recommendation at the time. We tried to move it to a subcommittee, which is our local living economy subcommittee group. And at that meeting, there was a recommendation from that group, which we can talk about in a minute, but there wasn't a quorum of downtown commission members there for it to be an official vote of the commission. So then there was enough interest from members there to have this kind of special meeting so that we can come together and try and make one formal recommendation finally. And that is our goal today. When we leave here to have a recommendation, whatever that may be. At the local living economy committee group, there was some question, and maybe I'll have Franzi, who chairs that committee, give a summary of what we came to as a recommendation, but there was discussion around a 1-year extension of US Cellular's contract. But then I'm not clear if that's even a possibility. Did we ever approach them? Because I heard you present that there are no more extensions, this is a new contract period.
Correct.
Did we ever approach them to say, are you interested in an extension?
Yeah.
Okay.
But again, because of how the contract's set up, a contract extension is not possible. So we're new contracts at this point. And we did talk with them, and a 1-year add-ons, it's not worth it because then we have to go through the whole process again. The staff time on our end, the effort on their end, the value's not there for them. 3 years was the minimum value. It makes sense. And frankly, with how the city process works and all the other moving parts in the community, 1-year extension still doesn't solve the problems.
Right.
Like, you need 2 or 3 years, and 3 years is our minimum go-to between the two companies at this point.
I think at that subcommittee group, there was discussion around how a 1-year delay may help, because there are other moving factors in the communities, including the TPDF fund, looking at how they might have a larger impact in downtown. And they are members of that CVB on that committee, so they had brought it up as well. Franzi, do you have those minutes in front of you that you could that you could at least maybe read our recommendation, or?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't really a formal recommendation. I think we definitely got, we weren't quite clear also on how downtown businesses were involved in the process. I know there have been public meetings, but as, you know, an asset of the community and having it branded, it's a big deal, and it also affects, you know, everyone, all the businesses here. Were they involved with the process besides the public meetings?
I would say they were involved in the sense that we put out a lot of information that we were going out there and looking for it, and a lot of media coverage initially. No one reached out wanting to provide input until they heard the potential names. So it would have been nice to have that input if there was anybody that they really felt strongly should not or should be included. But we did hold a public meeting. We had the opportunity for public to speak, and the more public and the more input there is, the harder it is to actually nail down one of these big deals, because it's a lot of money for a company to put out there, as you can imagine. So it's every single company wanted it to be extremely confidential that we were meeting with them. Like, nobody wanted anybody to know that we were meeting with them unless it got to the point they were going to give us a formal proposal.
I think he covered the other pieces.
We were struggling with whether or not to make a recommendation that wasn't actually viable. So if, you know, if our recommendation was to extend for a year, but that wasn't an option, we didn't feel like sending that language to council.
And it's not, and if you think about it, if you tie in the team-up plan, which you're talking about, so that's gonna end in April. If we delay this 1 year, is it realistic that any action's gonna be taken from that plan that will be finished in April by the time we have to sign a new deal anyway? Like, 1 year, again, is not enough time. If the goal is to pause, 3 years is the best option, continuing with US Cellular. However, what I would say is that then puts it out there to the world, who's gonna do this research whenever we go and try to find naming rights again, that, hey, there was a $500,000 offer out there, city stayed with this lower number, I don't need to come in at a big number if I wanna take this naming rights agreement. Like, it essentially devalues it only because the potential of a higher value is there. I don't wanna say US Cellular is devaluing our brand, but
But you're right.
comparatively it's devalued. So you have to think about all those different factors that are in there. And what are the odds, for example, that Harris would come back with the same offer next time?
But in all due respect, Chris, that's only taking a monetary stance on it, and I understand money's important, but it's not devaluing when statistics, as I said before in our meeting, show that, you know, I lived in Vegas for 3 years, that gaming industry actually contributes negatively to social determinants of health for children specifically and elderly. They're both at high risks, children's suicide and dropout rates of school, as well as the elderly in terms of financial extraction, in terms of like sitting there and gambling and having like other things happen. So I hear the monetary piece, but holistically, like, there are negative impacts from not, like, from choosing too quickly and only with certain factors that are being considered under a social determinant model.
And I don't disagree. I mean, I don't know any of those statistics. I don't have those statistics, but I would say, and I don't want to stand here and lobby for one or the other. Like, our job is to present the facts and have council make a choice, and you guys can make a recommendation. Cherokee is very different from Vegas. Vegas, the business model is casino, casino, casino. Cherokee, it's a business inside Cherokee, the town, right? And so it's a wholly owned enterprise of the Eastern Band. And the Eastern Band does a lot of good to the community. I have some statistics, but generally speaking, there's a lot of money that they funnel in through the Cherokee Preservation Foundation, which is funded by the enterprise. $166 million over a decade that's come into the general region. And their most recent grantees, there's actually a good number of them in Buncombe County, including the Community Foundation, the North Carolina Symphony, not to be confused with the Asheville Symphonies. Western Region Education Service Alliance, which is a group of school teachers. There's Western Carolina University, Cherokee Youth Council. There's a lot of money they're funneling back into programs that help. And if you think about what happens in Cherokee, the town, all of their social services are funded by the enterprise. Those social services wouldn't exist without it. And you could make the argument that they wouldn't need them without the casino, but likely they do because every community needs it, whether they have a casino or not. They funded the high school there, funded a hospital and extension wing on the hospital that's specifically for opioids. There's a lot of good that comes out of that enterprise over there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have a question, and I know you can't name names, but you said that there were 14 businesses that you originally talked to, or companies.
Yep.
And then it got down to 5. I'm just curious if you could share with us, were any of those other 5 headquartered in North Carolina?
2 of them were.
Chris, I wanna make
The other
sure.
was in
And do you know why those, they
every
broke
company
down?
every company has different reasons. A bank that we spoke with basically just said that they had naming rights at other locations. They're phasing out the naming rights side of their advertising plan, and as their contracts expire, they're gonna let them expire, and it just was how the business rolled. And no one's,
Yeah, I have one other question. I'm kind of surprised when you drill down on the numbers. The Civic Center seems or Cellular Center, excuse me, seems very concerned about having enough money to renovate Thomas Wolfe. But when you drill all the numbers down, only $148,000 goes into renovation from the US Cellular deal. So I'm just curious how you can say this is the best deal, even though I don't particularly like the Harrah's Cherokee either, but I'm just curious, when there's been so much emphasis placed on how you're gonna raise that 40 million or whatever the number finally comes in at, and you're getting very little actually from US Cellular.
I mean, that's kind of the point of showing what that new money is that it's very little to go towards the Thomas Wolfe. And I'm not saying it is the best deal. I'm saying if the goal is to delay and extend to wait to see what happens with the TMAP plan, the 3-year deal is the best deal, because that continues the brand. There's no cost, there's no rebranding, there's no change here, and then we can go back at it again in 3 years. If we try to do this again in a year, we're not going to have any offers except for US Cellular probably, because why would you as a company come back that quick after you've seen what happened? So I'm not saying it's the best deal. I'm saying it's the best deal if that's the goal. The best deal business-wise is obviously the Harrah's deal just because of the money. But, we're not talking just money. We're talking about community impact and brand and everything like that.
That's a good segue to one of my questions. Do we know the community impact other than the financial new monies for the Thomas Wolfe? Has there been any analysis on the visitor increase we might see, or visitor decrease we might see, or any of that? Do we know?
There's nothing specific to the name, just because by the time we had an actual proposal to do a study like that and get it turned around in time before the proposal expires is not realistic. Our venue as a whole has a little over $40 million of economic impact to Buncombe County annually. An influx of cash to do things like a video board or other fan-friendly improvements are gonna allow us to go after events that we can't go after currently. You know, we got really lucky with the Fed Cup, for example. They needed a video board, it's required as part of the specs. We have staff here that have a really long, like 20-year history with the USTA, and we're basically able to lobby that it was worth their time to rent that video board and bring the event here, which then obviously turned into a success and came back. But when we're bidding on NCAA wrestling events or NCAA basketball, like there's 500 other arenas in the country that have a video board, and that's a requirement because you need instant replay. And that extra cost of $20,000 to rent a video board for a few days is just, it's not worth it. So we'll probably, and you know, I can't guarantee anything because the economy could take a tank, you know, but having a video board makes a big change for our ability to go after other events that are similar to SoCon, that are shoulder season or winter events, during the week events that bring in not only teams and things like that from sports that are going to stay in hotels and bring business, but bring in large crowds that are regional and national.
So does that mean that, would a US Cellular extension or renewal, new contract preclude a separate naming or funding, sponsorship, et cetera, of a new video player thing?
No, I mean, we can, there's nothing in our contract currently and would be nothing in our new contracts that would not allow us to partner with an advertising agency to do a video board. I've been working on that for 3 years and have not successfully raised $1 million to pay for a video board, so wouldn't assume that it would match.
There's nothing to preclude us from having USCC with the Harrah's video board. I'm not saying that's on the table, but
Correct.
it's not
Yeah.
impossible.
Yeah.
And then similar with the parking deck, because the USCC contract doesn't include the parking deck.
Mhm.
And so is there, it looks to me like, are we seeing a couple $100,000 a year difference between the deals? Is that what we saw, or was it greater?
Yeah,
Is there
it's
some way to
about-
make that up and
Give
do
or
it
take, it's
back?
$300,000 difference. And, you know, we could go out there and try to sell naming rights on the parking
Right.
deck. I think that'd be a council decision, because it was specifically only if tied to our naming rights agreement.
Okay.
I can tell you, I've worked at other venues where we named the parking lots. We did a deal with Pepsi and had the Mountain Dew line,
Right.
Pepsi and so on. We could do that with the decks here, but I'm pretty sure that that would not be a very Asheville thing, for
Right,
example.
right.
I have a question. Do either offer preclude selling naming rights to the Thomas Wolfe Auditorium
They do not.
later?
Oh. So there's another.
So there's another potential funding source for other things that could happen.
Yes.
I mean, that may not be something we wanna do, but I think it's a question worth asking whether that's,
Yeah.
how that fits in.
Yeah.
All spaces are sellable, like the banquet hall could be sold, for example, or the concourse, we could sell the naming rights to the bathroom. The only thing that each precludes, like US Cellular, I can't do an advertising agreement for even a side with Verizon, for example. So there's telecommunications carve-outs.
Okay.
With Harris Cherokee, it's similar in that it's any gaming resort, so
Okay.
we can't have another casino advertising.
The other question I have, is that this process started at the finance committee, it looked like, did the finance committee or does the naming rights policy make any recommendations, or was there discussion on whether to do this in-house or hire one of the many naming rights consultants that exist in the country?
It does not specifically require one way or another.
Now, please don't be offended by this. I'm sure you've put a lot of work and done a great job and brought all this information here. But I do feel like I have to ask, this is sort of like the question of like, well, do you sell your house by owner, or do you get a real estate agent?
Yep.
The real estate agent, is oftentimes worth it. What can you tell us about the decision to keep this in-house, and how did that perhaps limit you?
I would say it didn't limit us by keeping it in-house. So we talked with IMG Sports, which is a really large company at this point that sells advertising and naming rights, mostly for college sports, but has some venues out there that don't have sporting agreements or tenants. And we also talked to the company, and blanking on the name right now, out of San Diego. And the carve-outs that were required in the contracts for us to keep our culturally and socially compatible phrase basically made it not worth it. So we're already losing 25% to a commission to that company if we contract with them. But then carving out specific types of companies or having the ability for them to secure a deal that then maybe gets turned down by council, that commission went way up really fast and didn't make it worth the while, especially when we knew that we had a really good opportunity to at the very least continue with a similar or slightly greater deal with US Cellular, that if they went through that whole process and then we ended up with US Cellular again and then we lose 25–30% of that, the value wasn't there. And we had enough inkling from local companies that we knew we were gonna have probably three bids. We ended up only having two, but we felt really confident in three when we started the process.
You mentioned that you had the students, the seniors do a study for you, and that it was great and impactful. And something I caught you saying was that they recognized in the other 99 cities that the largest corporate presence was the sponsor.
Yep.
Use BB&T as an example. Who is that here? The Biltmore? I mean, I know the city's like the third largest employer. We've got Biltmore Mission.
I mean, now it's HCA. Or once that
HCA,
goes
right?
through.
Right,
But,
right.
I would
Or-
say, as far as headquartered, it's Ingalls.
It's Ingalls.
I mean, there's plenty of bigger companies that have a presence, but headquarters
Yeah.
is Ingalls.
Considering we all probably use Ingalls, I don't think there would have been as much kickback.
Yeah, I'm sure they were on the list too.
Right, right.
Yeah.
I'm sure they were.
I'll talk to them on my way home, I gotta do some shopping.
Or even, explore Asheville, is that something they, I realize, I'm not suggesting you go back to the drawing board, and I appreciate the long effort you've made thus far and continuing to engage with us. It's just, I guess what I'm also sensing is that I hope this commission makes two recommendations today, one of which is how to advise council our thoughts on this process, but also what we do in 5 or 10 years from now next time. Because we kind of had to encourage y'all to come and meet with us, and, obviously doing so willingly, but should the commission have been a part, or should have there been a grinder process, like you were talking about, Andrew? So we may want to talk to that later, but I wanted to make sure we mentioned it. Another question I had was, what happens if there is no new deal? I mean, we end up taking a financial hit, right? We would have to cover the debt service. We couldn't just go back to the Asheville Civic Center.
I mean, we always can.
We
It's
could,
certainly an option.
But the budget impact would be significant.
Correct. So we would have an initially 1-year cost to change the name back to either Asheville Civic Center or whatever new name we determine. Roughly $200,000 is where we came up with that estimate for the signage change out before. And then about $170,000, that first bit of naming rights money goes to debt service. And that debt service doesn't sunset until 2032, so there'd be an annual $170,000 revenue that would need to be covered in some way, shape, or form, had we gone back.
So is there a pro forma model? Because obviously if you get into this model of naming rights, then it kind of needs to stick with you for a while, right? And we're on the early side of this. So is there a pro forma model that goes out 40 years to say, if this, then that, instead of using within the contract framework? Because I think it could help us as a community. I understand that US Cellular is the shareholder with the city, but the stakeholder community, there's a lot of I think there's a lot of potential concern that whatever we choose this time, like last time, we're not solving the model, so that stakeholders and shareholders kind of are determining it together. So I think there's an opportunity for that. And is there a 40-year model that would?
Not specific to naming rights. So naming rights was born from the renovations that we were trying to put together. And forgive me, I don't know all the details this was before I worked for the city, but we were trying to put all the funding together to renovate the main arena and the common spaces, including this room, in order to secure the Southern Conference Basketball Championships. And we got to a point where there was a small gap in funding. And Sam Powers, the Director of Community and Economic Development, under my boss, he went out and solicited naming rights and secured the US Cellular deal that helped fill that gap. And that got us through the first 9 years, obviously. And I believe at the time, the theory was that we would continue naming rights moving forward as we could to help pay off that debt service, but that there was an understanding from the council at that time that if for some reason no one bid on our naming rights at some point, we'd have to eat the cost to come back to be Asheville Civic Center again, but that we still defrayed those costs for 9 years that someone else paid for, and private money that didn't come from taxpayers. I'm speaking a little out of turn there, but that's kind of the presumption I've been given.
Another question you had mentioned about in your presentation was staff time. So sticking with US Cellular Center, that was pretty simple.
Yep.
No, like the entire time it's been pretty simple, it sounded like, and there would obviously be no new time because nothing really changes. But then moving to a new brand, what's the impact on staff time? You said something like it would be 4 to 5 times, but is that like our staff? We're hanging signs, we're.
Not really that, more like managing the relationship, and
Oh, okay.
I would say, I'm assuming 4 to 5 times, just because
Okay.
the value is 4 to 5 times greater. We have a marketing coordinator, part of his job is to help market events, manage our website, our socials. The naming rights relationship's gonna fall on him and I, and it'll just be part of what we do, whether it's managing VIPs that come from, or signage change outs, or new branding on the digital side, and that's really all kind of an unknown.
But we're not hiring people to make it happen and things.
Hopefully not. If it comes down to 2 years into the agreement, we say, hey, we really need somebody, I would like to think that we can get that funded, hopefully through new revenue that's come from events from the video board, for example.
But that wasn't factored in, like, looking at the staff hours wasn't factored into increase in expenditures. It's just holistically, when we look at the numbers, we're looking at the inflow, we're not looking at the breakdown of like how that money could get drawn down by unknowns or new factors that impact the total number.
Well, the one and only potential expense impact is gonna be that staff time, and in the grand scheme of things, it's not completely significant, plus that funding's there to pull it from. And any other unknowns that are gonna come in, that would be like from the video board projects to the other things, we're gonna learn those while we bid those projects, and that will scale what those projects are. And we've completely designed, scoped, and quoted the video board project, for example, and the other projects that would be within that $250,000 fan improvement. The targets that we've had walking through the venue with the Harris Cherokee team are much smaller projects. They're not like big grand things. They're little things that make the fan experience better. So they're not going to have a huge level of staff time or costs that come with them.
And do you operate from a balanced budget, or do you do like net profit? Like cause now my brain is going to like potential expenditures tied to new revenue, and then how does that get captured and not cause there are potential increased operating expenditures. And so how does that, because we're just looking at the big numbers and not necessarily what the net on any of that is.
So there's a lot of unknown to try to get to a net number, but so we operate as an enterprise fund. So we put our budget in, it has a flat number there's a cash subsidy, a cost allocation, which is charges from other city departments to us, and then a debt service cost allocation to get to our total annual subsidy. So that ebbs and flows every year based on total planned events, what those types of events are, what our profit margin is on those type of events. I'm trying to find a way to answer your question because I'm not really sure what you've asked either.
Yeah, I'm just trying to get to like a realized number.
It's hard too because of that, to Chris's point, with the video screen, you could see bigger incomes.
Mm-hmm.
You could see greater events, more events, bigger incomes, and then that would also impact.
But you could also tie that to like increased market share, like uncaptured market share to like now increased market share and like a small percentage, whether it's 1 or 5% of that conversion. Not trying to get into your business model.
I would argue that not only is there additional revenue from the events that come, but if you go to any venue, you'll see that there's signage around, or whenever you go into that venue, there's always X number of commercials that you hear or see on the video board. So those aren't necessarily tied to that specific event. So Tedeschi Trucks Band comes and plays a concert, and you see a commercial for Explore Asheville beforehand. The Tedeschi Trucks didn't line that up, the venue did, the venue earned that money. And so there's a lot of opportunity there for that, like Ingles that we brought up earlier, their ads are everywhere. I like to think we can work out some type of deal with the company like me. So there's revenue that's gonna come in from that, and the additional staff time to make things like that happen isn't incredibly significant. And we have a production team, a 2-person production team already, we have a marketing team, between Matthew and I, so there's a lot of salaried people that already exist to help work with those things.
And you mentioned something like 180 million impressions.
Mhm.
Essentially, it's like this core number that it's what people are basically buying when they're getting the naming rights, right?
Yes.
That
Impressions.
real estate. what's our impression growth from when the original deal was made in 2011? Has our impression growth matched the increase in these bids? Is there a comparison there?
I don't think there was an impression tally made back then. I think when this happened the first time, it was trying to find a partner that had the funds that made it feel like it made sense, and that dollar figure made sense to council. We did a lot more data research this time around than last time. I'd say probably more work last time to make it happen, because it's really hard to go from a civic center to a named venue. US Cellular, frankly, they took a pretty big leap of faith with us. Like, if you guys remember what the venue was a decade ago, paint was peeling, roof was leaking, walls were broken. Like, it was not a great place. I'm not saying it's Taj Mahal now, but it's a nice event venue. It's very flexible, and they took a leap of faith coming in to help us finalize that to bring the SoCon, which is then dovetailed to bring many other events. Our total event load has gone up every single year I've been here, which has been, I'm on my 6th year at this point. Our total revenue 6 years ago, our budget revenue was 2.1 million. It's just under 5 million for this coming year. Like, the naming rights is a big catalyst that made that happen. So if you take that value and you think about the different value that comes with this bigger deal, there's a lot of potential there.
One of the things that, I feel like we're comparing two piles of money, and I really wish we had more piles of money to compare. Like,
Yeah.
because it's hard for me to get a sense of, is this, are we really looking at the best deal we can get? I know it's the best deal we see right now, and it's just, I'm really struggling with being able to, with the valuation, and then thinking about the compromises that are associated with, being associated with, the only vice that we don't have in the city. It's a little hard for me to really pick up on.
So to speak to the value, like if you talk to all of my industry friends and they hear me say, hey, we have 2 offers for naming rights, they're like, how did you do that? It's a very rare thing to get more than one offer for a naming rights deal. And the fact that it's higher than 300,000 is rather incredible. The fact that it's even 300,000 without a major corporation from the town and without a tenant, because naming rights deals tend to happen at venues that have a sporting tenant, because these type of advertising deals really kind of follow along with hockey, arena football, baseball, because it's easy to throw in season tickets, and it makes it more valuable for that company because there's more they can do with it. And we don't have a tenant, so that's why you see every single year is different. Outside of the craft fair and the Christmas Jam and the SoCon, we don't have the same exact events every year. Every year we're hitting the pavement to get new events in here because they change constantly. So it's harder to keep that value up there.
Well, and kudos to you for even getting us to a point where we could see an increase in revenue for the city in general. I think that's a citywide issue right now. I'm curious, what you said earlier about, devaluing, refusing that one of these deals could really devalue the next package, which is, I think, to your point, Andrew, an alarming concern that I would have, because if we say, I think you're right, that if we say we're gonna turn down a larger deal, who would come back with that deal again?
Right.
That's a big risk I hadn't considered, and I appreciate you pointing that out.
It's less about the cash at that point and more about like what company fits, and if my
Right.
company fits, do I
Then
need to
I'm
put in a big
lowballing.
number?
But,
Right.
but there's a counter argument to that too, which is to say that who's to say that, if I turn down, I know as a musician, I bid on gigs all the time, and sometimes, having turned down a gig I didn't think was worth it is great for my reputation, because it means the next offer's higher. Is that force not at play here?
It could be, you could say that. I think the way to make that happen would be declining both offers, frankly, because if you decline the big one and just stick with what you have, it's not the same as the point you're trying to make.
I see, yeah.
That's interesting.
So, I don't know if this has been discussed at all, but one of the things that comes to mind is, Harris Cherokee's goals in this let me ask, have they told you their goals or had mentioned anything about measuring their goals from the naming rights?
They haven't given me like specific written goals, but they're trying to extend the brand. You've seen their billboards, their ads are throughout the county, throughout the state, region, frankly. They want another opportunity for people to see their brand name so that they think about them for a trip at some point in time. They were carving out certain ticket allocations because they want to bring VIPs from there. They've actually specifically told me that they want to bring VIPs from the resort to come here to eat at one of our amazing restaurants, have a VIP experience at a show, and then go back to their resort. Like the allure of Asheville is there. Almost all of their VIPs fly into Asheville Airport. They pick them up. They take them there. Like they know of Asheville. They know what's going on here. They want to see it. We serve a lot of our craft beer beverages there. I mean, they want part of that Asheville brand, and that's what naming rights is. Like you're coming into a brand and you're trying to capitalize.
But it's a little different in that what you're saying, Chris, and again, with all due respect, you know, I think you are a great general manager, is they're really owning the experience. And so like I have a strong background in like business and sales and all that. And so what you just said and comparing the two, US Cellular is actually, they don't have a brand that identifies displacement in a city. Like the Asheville identity is very clear there, where when you go to Harris Cherokee Center, Asheville, actually the displacement of identity is escalated because it goes to a different place in a different location, and just to what you said, it actually takes relationship to carry the relationship ownership of a VIP to Harris here and back, owning the whole experience and displacing the community here. And so again, I have nothing against Harris Cherokee personally or the Koala Boundary or any of the sovereign nation. My point here is about Asheville identity, social determinants, displacement, community, and what our brand strategy is when we go to naming rights, because I think the whole process is really cool and great, and I'm so glad we're doing it overall. There's nothing about naming rights I think is negative. I'm personally at a standstill on this one because of that slight nuance.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, it's just in how Asheville is in the name.
It's really like US Cellular is not a experience. It's not a place. It's not a destination,
Okay.
right? It's a
Okay.
product.
Mhm.
It's very different than a destination, which places really embody culture and identity of people, and topography and land and artifacts and all that. So when another place wants to come and say, we want to own the experience of your place back to ours, I'm wondering if that's the message we want to carry forward, whether it's naming rights again in 6 to 9 years or what have you. And so that's like my flag on the field. It isn't the money, it isn't the this, it isn't the that, it's all of the piece that I'm talking about.
I mean, the Harris Cherokee brand brings a name with it, so if you think luxury, you think this high-end space, you can also think slot machines, I get that, but like, they do luxury, that's what they do, right? And so if you tie that in with a VIP experience, there's a lot of good that can come of that. When we've done Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Nye, for example, we partnered with the Collider to have them do our VIP experience because those things made sense. And so if you find the right brand to partner with and help grow that VIP experience, one, it becomes more valuable, but two, it's a better experience for the customer. So like if you just do a VIP meet and greet and you pay $100 more and you go back and you shake your hand and take a picture and you leave, like that's not very fun. But if it's an experience that you're learning about, whatever it may be, like when we've done it with Bill and I, we had some information about climate change and what was going on, and just a jovial guy, and we were taking pictures, and you can change the experience based on who you partner with in those VIP experiences. And I'm not saying that they would only touch the VIP side, but it enhances the whole fan experience depending on how you tie in the brand.
Well, if I can add one thing, Kimberly, my opinion on naming rights is a little different from yours. I have never liked the idea that this place has been named, and I know every city does it basically, but the fact is it has naming rights, and it's got to, at this point, I'm certainly not interested in seeing it not be, not those revenues being removed. And to me, and I've talked over the last 3 days, I have talked to everybody I can think of from every spectrum of life, and I've really worked at this, not just people I work with, but Episcopal ministers, young school teachers, a retiree that lives next door to my office. I just tried to kind of understand perspective from other people. every single person that I've talked to has had basically the same answer. And that is, what is the big deal? It's the Civic Center. And look at the difference, I'm sorry about the name too, but look at the, the synergy opportunity with this entity. There is not another group anybody could name in Western North Carolina that comes anywhere near the synergy opportunities we have with this. Has anybody ever been to a concert there? That's why I go to Cherokee's, because the concerts are incredible. The level of service that their staff has, it's like a world-class experience. And they execute stuff really well. I happen to know a lot about what goes on in Cherokee today. And through all of the entities that have just exploded in the last 15 years. They have the nicest high school in the state of North Carolina. A brand new world-class hospital. It just goes on and on and on. And I totally, part of what I've been thinking about is just the gambling issue and the perception. And I just found it extremely interesting that everybody, and I've talked to over a dozen people about this and just sat down for over 5 minutes and just really tried to understand their viewpoint. Not a single person has even mentioned the gambling aspect. And to me, I'm tired of seeing Thomas Wolfe Auditorium look like a third-class facility. The paint is peeling off that. This room is great. There have been some incremental improvements that have been really outstanding. It has taken a long time. I just think that if the city passes up this opportunity, I don't think there's going to be another group that's going to see the financial interest in this. And that's why they're offering what they're offering. There are huge opportunities for Harris Cherokee. But we have significant needs. I guess my one question was it considered, the possibility of this being a 5-year option or 5-year contract? It seems like is it 10 years now is what's on the table?
Does it
It's
over
5 years with a 5-year
Okay.
mutually agreeable, which means that both
Mutual.
sides have to agree,
Okay.
so
Okay.
it's not a forced extension if they wish.
Well, I think in looking at the time too, I'm gonna kind of leave it at that, but I'm just, it's not a perfect answer. I think there's some really good concerns. I think that understanding the process in the next 5 years or what happens in the next 10 years, I think that is really important. I do think this sets a bar for the next sponsor. Does anybody in Asheville actually have US Cellular? Does anybody? Oh, you do.
I used to.
I don't-
Wait, you have to probably.
I don't know anything about what they do for community. I can think of a dozen things right now of what
calls.
So
Harris
I
Cherokee
can give
does.
you some of those if you
It's,
you'd like.
What did you say was the amount of money that Harris has invested into Cherokee over the past 10 years?
160 million, I heard.
So no, that's not all of it.
Oh,
Um,
that's just part of it.
In the last decade, through the Cherokee Preservation Foundation, which is also funded by the enterprise, they've granted $166 million, which is on the Cherokee Preservation Foundation's website,
Wow.
to many, many agencies. And
That's a heck of a lot more than the TDA invests in this community.
it's a lot of money, and it's not all right in Cherokee. It's not all in Buncombe County. It's throughout the region, and in some cases the country. But what I would say is there's potential for other revenue, because if you're partnered with another branch of their organization, maybe there's something that happens here that we can find a way to increase awareness about some type of Native American culture. Maybe Unto These Hills does a residency in the Thomas Wolfe, and it's found through a grant from the Preservation Foundation. There's other opportunities potentially, but we can't get into that because you're 5 ifs down the road.
Right.
Can we open the public?
Yeah, we will have public comment in just a minute. I just have one more question.
I just want, because I'm gonna have to
Okay.
leave in about 2 minutes.
Oh, when you do vote, okay.
Well, if you're
Okay,
gonna vote in
do
2
they-
minutes, I've got
It's okay,
another
go ahead.
appointment. But like Stephen Lee, I've been trying to talk to people and get their feeling, and everyone I talk to says, take the money. Thomas Wolfe needs the repairs. I haven't heard anyone have any concerns over the brand. That's the people have talked with, and like Stephen Lee, I've toured through Cherokee's whole whole school campus and their hospital, and what they've provided for that community is outstanding.
So I had to leave early last time, so I was the one who didn't get counted, but I did say no before I left. So that wasn't reflected in there. I'm saying no now and I have to leave.
We're
Please
gonna lose our
consider the
quorum.
working class because
Well,
people
about
who
to lose
spend
our
money
the meeting was supposed to
can
be
say it's
till
okay.
Supposed to be till 4 and we're already 10.
Yeah.
Five
We
and
need
four.
6.
Got your phone on the table?
Maybe we skip public. Is anyone able to stay? 3 of you leave, we're stuck.
I've got 4:15.
Are you tied? You can't stay?
I'm staying.
Oh, you're not leaving?
No.
Oh, I thought you had to leave.
Mm.
So 2 people left.
I need to
Okay,
leave.
we're good. Huh?
You need
You have 5 minutes?
Consent.
Okay, here's what we're gonna do. Does anybody else have any questions for Chris? Okay. Public comment. Does anybody wish to speak to this or have questions? Okay. Oh, yes, you, sir. If you could just stand up, you have 3 minutes to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Wes Wright. I was former commissioner, member here on the Civic Center Commission, and I do have a business relationship with Harris Cherokee, just to put that out
Okay.
before everybody. I've been in Asheville since 1968. I've grown up seeing this town change a lot. When I moved here, downtown was thriving. When I was in high school, about 72, the mall opened and downtown died and it all went away. So I've seen a lot of changes come and the town revived from the 90s through where it is today. New investment in town, new names in town, new hotels in town, new businesses. So that's kind of the cycle that occurs in any kind of community. With this discussion today around the Harris naming rights for the Civic Center, we've got a chance to make some more changes. We can upgrade Thomas Wolfe. That's where the majority of these excess capital funds will go to. A sorely needed venue that needs a lot of improvement. Harris employs about 3,000 people at the casino in Cherokee. Average wage of $42,000, full benefits, 401k, health plan, pension plan. Nobody has a pension plan anymore. They have a pension plan. We have about 100 Buncombe County residents that work at the casino and travel to and from every day, benefit from the environment out there and from the wages they get. And then the biggest benefit that was mentioned by many of you all is the investment that the Eastern Band is now able to go back into itself. Hospitals, schools, community centers, infrastructure in the Cherokee community that probably would have never happened at the level it's happening today. And it's all because of the casino. It's so successful and profitable. Those funds go right back into the Cherokee community. So we've got opportunity for Harris to invest in our community. They've seen the value in Asheville, they've seen the growth in Asheville, they've seen the improvements in Asheville, and we can take that same advantage that Eastern Band has done in their community and have that invested into our community. Harris' name could be on the event, the building and associated with events, and I don't see this as an infringement to our community. The chamber, the community at large, all the business partners have worked so hard over the years to make Asheville a brand. Asheville brand stands alone by itself. Putting a name on a building, I don't think will compromise that. Gambling was brought up. I just want to remind everybody, there are about 140 North Carolina Educational Lottery purchase sites in Buncombe County and at City of Asheville. There's a lot of gambling going on already in our community. That's what the lottery is. But City of Asheville has received $3.8 million, all invested in the schools. Buncombe County has received about $24 million, all invested in the schools from the lottery. So we're already getting lottery or gambling money back to our community to improve facilities. We've set a precedent with US Cellular in giving the naming rights opportunity out there. And we've given everybody an opportunity to respond. Harris Cherokee has come back with the best response so far. And I think it's the right decision for the city to make and for our community to make. And the last point that was made earlier, I think we need to remember that Cherokee is a neighbor. They're a culture and a unique group of people that are a part of Western North Carolina. And I think bringing that partnership here, as Chris mentioned, with some things we could probably do with the Unto These Hills and some other aspects of it would be a great benefit to our community and help make a bridge between these two communities. So I encourage everybody to support Harris Cherokee as the naming of it.
Thank you, sir. Just got 3 minutes. Okay, we're gonna, here's the thing. Does anybody feel ready to make this motion? If not, I will. Okay. Chris, I wanna thank you personally for sticking out through this. I feel like you did not offer any kind of biased opinion, but I found you to be very informative today. And I feel like I have personally changed my perspective on this, throughout the course of this meeting, so I thank you for having this special meeting with us. I am actually going to make a motion, you all may or may not second and approve, but to recommend to council that we adopt a resolution approving the selection of Harrah's as the naming rights partner for the next 5 years. I would like to address some conditions on that, and maybe you all would support, which is to then look at a greater branding or community process for the ensuing 5 years. I don't wanna make the motion too dramatic. That's my motion.
Would we wanna include the downtown commission as part of the process?
And it could be that the motion is really about, that we help outline that process.
Should we maybe keep it simple today and talk about naming rights in general for more facilities than just this particular deal?
I think this is specific. Council meets next week in like 5 days on this specific issue, so.
Can you read it again?
Yeah, I'm gonna even simplify it, we can have a secondary recommendation. A recommendation to council to adopt a resolution approving the selection of Harrah's Cherokee Center, Asheville, I'm not sure what the technical name is there, I'm sorry, as
It's
a name,
on that page.
well, there's several, as a naming rights partner for the next 5 years.
I second the motion.
Any further discussion, comments, questions from the commission?
I'd like to thank Chris for satisfactorily answering all my questions.
Fully informed you were today, Chris, I appreciate that.
Transparent.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Show of hands. Any opposed? Brian, Andrew, we're
No,
good.
I was yes.
Oh, you were
I
yes,
was
you
yes.
raised for opposed. Brian is the opposition? Okay,
You can't vote.
all right. We are adjourned. Thank you for being here today.
Mhm.